As someone that's been playing high elo solo queue for the past 9 or 10 years now, I've played against every single off-meta champion that you could think of. So today we're going to be ranking the 20 best off-meta top laners in the game, and breaking down the strengths and weaknesses. I'm also going to be recommending a standard build and rune page in case you wanted to try one yourself. So if you're somebody that loves making the enemy top laner suffer, playing up against a champion that never versed before, then this video is going to be perfect for you. Now, before we get started, just in case I don't mention a champion you're waiting on, I'm only going to be talking about the top 20 off-meta champions. So if you like a champion like Neferi or Kiana, they're not going to be in the top 20. Unfortunately, you're not going to find them, just as a couple of examples, even though they are technically playable in top lane. Another example of a champion I won't talk about would be a champ like Trundle, where even though his pick rate is very low, he's not a meta champion, he's a very well-known top laner, so we're not going to be talking about champions like that. So our first example is going to be Nocturne top. And he's going to find himself straight into A tier. Definitely an underrated off-meta champion on this patch. Now, in terms of the setup here, you can see it's all about getting that Jack of all trades proc as soon as possible. And it is a little bit harder now, with the Doran's Blade change not giving you that lifesteal, so you lose one Jack of all trades proc, but as long as you go Merc trades, you can get 10 every time very easily. Last patch you could do it with Tabbies, now you just straight up need Merc treads, so that does lower his power a little bit. Now keep in mind, this tier list is going to be for high elo only, mainly because I almost never see the champions we're going to be talking about today played in lower elo brackets, so it's easier for me to give a rough estimate of how powerful they are. If I mainly focus on higher ranks, that doesn't mean they're not playable in lower elo brackets, especially a champ like Nocturne. Now, the playstyle for this champion is all going to be about their pushing and roaming. It's not really about the 1v1. You want to get tier mat early, you want to push in top and look for plays around the map. You want to attack mid, you want to attack jungle, and really utilize that ultimate. Now, if they do go onto you and you get an extended trade with your Conqueror, Q and E, you can beat a lot of champions in that all-in, so definitely very powerful in that aspect, but your goal is not really the 1v1, it's all about spreading that lead around the map. So if you love playing that playstyle, or if you're just sick of your noob jungler holding you back, or your bot lane keeps feeding before you can really do anything, Nocturne's a great champ to actually have high early game impact as a top laner, which can be very rare for a lot of top lane champions. Now, in terms of the weaknesses of this champion, you are going to run into not scaling that well. A lot of champions are going to outscale you inside. If you don't get a lot of work done early game, you're not going to feel that useful later on, so that is a problem you're going to have, and you're pretty useless from behind. That is also a problem. You're pretty much a full damage champion that flies on in, so if you're not ahead of the curve, you are going to struggle, so you need to make sure you're getting really good proactive plays around the map, and you're only committing with your ulti if it looks like it's going to have a very high chance of working out. Next up, we have my personal favorite off-meta top laner, Zilean, and I'm going to be putting him straight into A tier. I'd actually put him in S tier if you used him only as a counter pick. And I have a little bit of a soft spot for this champion. When I was coaching a team for a year, our jungler was a really good Korean player, way too aggressive, kept suiciding. Zilean was the ultimate fix for our team, it did extremely well. Now in solo queue, this champion, amazing as a counter pick like I mentioned, but even as a blind pick, he does relatively well because not a lot of players know how to play into it, and they're going to play too aggressive. It's kind of like the Kayn syndrome, where they really want to punish you early game and they try really hard to, and that's going to cause them to make a lot of mistakes and make a lot of damage, or take a lot of damage, and this champion just scales like a complete monster. As soon as you've got your first base off, if you get Lost Chapter especially, this champion is actually really powerful in lane, very easy to mitigate and neutralize a lot of matchups, especially champions with no gap closes, like a Volibear or a Darius or a Set. They can pretty much do nothing against you. There are some matchups that can be tricky if they ignore you and break the tower, especially if you're behind, so you do have to be careful about that. But definitely this champion's amazing. It's my personal favorite pick when my jungler plays a champ like Master Yi or like an Olaf, where usually if they don't play that well individually, they're not that strong, but with a Zilean they become broken. I'm not a fan of Zilean with like a Kindred. I know some people like that as a mid jungle, or Zilean Graves. You want to be playing it with a strong champion that just goes in 1v9s, even like a Xin Zhao or a Rengar. These types of champions do really well. Now you can see for the build, it's a lot of ability haste and movement speed. I even like a movement speed rune here. After the buffs, Adapt is perfectly fine, a little bit stronger for lane, but I like movement speed when I feel like I can, into matchups like Volibear, where they're not going to be able to really reach you, you don't need that extra damage. So you can see the rune page, you can mess around with the secondaries a little bit, but area is always going to be locked in, and attack speed is to help you CS under tower and put your opponent down with auto attacks. He also does relatively well into other ranged matchups as well, as you can just bomb the wave, and if they try to force onto you, slap them with the E double bomb, not much they can do about it. And you can just kind of see cheap items after Archangels. You go into Shirelias, and then just any haste item like Cosmic Drive, or into the Horizon Focus is good as well. And then just rounding off the build with like a Dead Man's or something. I'm getting lost in the source a bit. This champion is very fun, but as you can see, the main playstyle of this champion is to neutralize top and support your teammates, make your teammates really broken. So if you have champions that do really well with the movement speed, with the revive, like I said, must use and Zhao champs like that, Zilean's amazing. You don't really pick him to pair with your AD carry, but he does have that benefit. If your Jinx, if your Sylas is popping off, you can make them completely busted, of course, but I'd only really want you to play this champion if you have a strong jungle pairing with it. Never play Zilean with like a Talia or something like that. That's going to be a free instant loss, or like a Kayn or a Grave, something useless. You want to be playing Zilean with something that's going to get stuck in, and the movement speed is going to make them completely broken. Next up, we have Zac, who's going to find himself in B tier, and I probably would have kept him in A tier last patch, but due to the second wind and D-shield nerf, it definitely hurts him in a lot of his matchups. Zac is very much a stay low HP champion, abuse second wind, abuse picking up your blobs, and make it volatile in your lane, so the nerf to those sustain runes definitely going to hurt him in a lot of his matchups. Now, big benefit to this champion, you're an amazing hard engaged champion, one of the best hard engages in the game. So if you have a team comp that's kind of ugly, not much CC, not much frontline, like a Graves jungle, like a Soraka support, these comps we just love to play with in solo queue, then Zac's going to be a great pick to really fix your team comp. And because a lot of players don't really know what he does, you have a lot of solo queue threat in lane as well, with the insane sustain and all-in threat at 6. The early game is a little bit weak, but after your first recall, if you get Bramble or Barmy Cinder, level 5, level 6, you start to really come online, and again, you can catch a lot of people off guard. Weakness of this champion is that week 1 to 3, you don't really get priority that often, so that can be annoying, and at the end of the day, you are still a full tank champion. There are some builds you can do with Liandry's and stuff like that to spice it up, so I recommend doing that if you're playing Zac in lower brackets, but at the end of the day, you are still a full tank. If your team doesn't do well, and you're in a hard matchup, your carry potential is going to be a bit low, but that's kind of the same for all top laners. If your whole team does badly, it can be quite hard. But Zac does have that opportunity to carry all these early game fights. That 1 to 2 item spike when you rock up to a dragon or a Rift Herald fight or anything like that, you can definitely carry. And if you get a good engage, of course, it's going to turn the game. So definitely really good if you love that playmaking playstyle and you just love being that beefcake frontline. Moving on to Cassiopeia, and she's going to be our first S tier off-meta champion. She's definitely one of the strongest off-meta tops in the game at the moment. The problem with her is she's also one of the hardest. You need thousands and thousands of games on her. You need to be, I'd say, a one-trick or have one-tricked her in the past to make her work. She is just that difficult. Definitely a really high skill ceiling champion, so only commit to it if you're in it for the long term. And I mainly recommend her for people that used to play Cassiopeia mid that swap to top, or just mid laners that switch to top. She can be a good one if you still want to play those mages, but definitely it's a champion that you have to just love and see yourself playing for years and years. Now, there are 2 build paths you can go. The first one is from the Korean Cassiopeia top laners who like to build Blackfire. Shock, who's one of the best Cassiopeias I know. He's a hater of it, so I'll put both builds on the screen and you can make a judgment call at which one you like more. Both are definitely good options. Now, the big benefit of this champion is it's an amazing blind pick. The counters, if you want to call them that, are just champions that can survive into her, like a Na, like a Rumble, like a Jace, champs like that, where you can kind of do well into her. Again, I wouldn't really call them counters, just champs that can survive or do well into her with gank setup, stuff like that. You're mainly just playing for ganks against her. Very few top laners can beat her in the 1v1. You should probably ban Irelia though, that one can be quite tricky. Now, this champion also scales very well, one of the best front-to-back tops in the game. She's kind of like the range version of Gwen in a fight, where she just shreds frontline, really hard for anyone to dive onto her, so you can kind of visualize her that way in team comps. Now, she's not as good as a side laner, so you will make the draft a little bit weird as well. So that's going to be the weakness of her. You might make your draft ugly. You could imagine having Azir or Victor mid with Cassio top. The draft's going to be a little bit ugly. And we all know our jungler's not going to see 2 mages and pick a tank for us. He's probably going to pick Kayn anyway. So it can make your team comps very, very ugly. But the best scaling in the game is winning your lane if you smash your matchup. The comp doesn't matter. So just keep that in mind. If you play this champion, you need to be excellent at your laning. You need to do very, very well. I've only fully versed 3 or 4 good Cassios in my life. And they have amazing Q accuracy. It's just mental how they can predict your movement and hit Qs consistently. When I've versed one that's only got 1,000 games, not 5,000, and they're not hitting every Q, the champ is quite easy to kill, quite easy to farm, a lot of bruises, so it does, rely on Cassio to make mistakes for a lot of bruises to beat her. So if you are the Cassiopeia, you have to play well quite consistently. And team fighting, if you are just a regular top laner who play champs like Darius and Sid, it's going to be a massive pickup for you. So the skill ceiling is also a negative side of this champion as well. Doesn't even have an easy skill floor. It's hard to play and hard to master, so keep that in mind if you're wanting to play her. Next up, we have Rek'sai, and this may surprise some of you, but I'm going to be putting him into B tier. I know he was a good champion at Worlds, but what's good on the World stage is very different to what's good in solo queue. Rek'sai is an amazing neutralizer. He's a really good weak side champion, which is why pro teams love him so much. He can go even, or slightly ahead or slightly losing, into pretty much anything, which is why you saw him picked into champions like Ambessa, who are very powerful in lane. But in solo queue, you don't really want champs that are just meatballs that go even. You want champs that can consistently gain leads in lane, and Rek'Sai is not really that. He does spike really hard 1 to 2 items, when a lot of champs can't kill you even though you only have HP, because there's not much damage at that point in the game, so you are quite strong then. I'd say similar to Renekton, maybe a little bit stronger of a version than Renekton at the moment, where you can just go even or slightly winning in pretty much any matchup. Renekton has a stronger lane, but Rek'Sai spikes a little bit harder, a bit more threat in fights, so it's kind of a trade-off there. The big benefit of this champion is you are just extremely strong at that point, and if you do get ahead, it is quite easy to proxy and gank, because you are a jungle champ, so you can just pop behind mid from a tunnel and gank them, stuff like that, so he does have that access to that playstyle, but you scale pretty poorly, and if you're behind, you are pretty useless, so that's something you have to keep in mind as well. Next up, we have Anivia, and Anivia I'm going to be putting in high B tier. If you use her only as a counter pick, I'd probably put her in low S or high A, something like that, but again, that's not going to be fair. So the reason why she loses a bit of points is she's pretty situationally broken. She's good in very certain spots, but pretty useless in others. She's really good into dive. Into a situation where the champs have to run towards you, she can be extremely useful for short range dive comps. But as every top laner, so she doesn't really stand out in that aspect compared to some of our other champions that have niche situations. And yes, she's pretty good at going even into most matchups, but she doesn't really have ways to snowball and get ahead in a lot of lanes. Iver's probably the best Cassiopeia player in Korea. They went top lane against my Jax, and even though he's an amazing player, I didn't really feel the pressure that this champion can put onto you. It didn't really feel that bad, and because our comp wasn't like a full melee dive comp, it wasn't really that useful as well, and I've watched a little bit more of it as well. So basically, this champion is situationally broken, but as an all-rounder, it's kind of just a go-even champ and just team fight, but you don't really spike as hard during that 1 to 2 item spike. Of course, scales quite well like all mages, but I'd say it's just pretty average overall, so maybe middle or lower end of B tier. Next up, we have Sylas, one of my personal favorites as well. Now, this champion, unfortunately, I will be putting him into C tier. There are some situations where he's just broken S tier for sure. The obvious one is into Malphite. Another one would be into a champ like Alistar support. If you get his ulti, even Gnar top, it can be quite good for you. I wouldn't say that matchup's super Sylas favored by any means if the Gnar play is good, but playing Sylas with Gnar ulti always good, of course. Now, the problem with Sylas at the moment is people are a bit smarter these days. They're not going to blind pick Alistar or blind pick Malphite with Sylas available. Even if mid lane is already picked, people play Sylas jungle, so it's even lower, value that you're going to get from the Sylas counter pick in your pool. So that's going to be the main reason. There's just few situations where he's broken, and there are a lot of hard matchups as well. Even matchups like Garen, matchups like Renekton, a lot of classic top lane champs, and Besser as well. They are going to give you a very, very tough time. Now, the build is a little bit flexible. You can see it's mainly just the Conqueror getting stuck in. No electrocute one-shot builds in top lane. Of course, we're going to be versing beefcakey champs. Maybe if you verse a squishy top, you can. But for the most part, your build will look like this. Now, the strengths of this champion, he is very snowbally. If you get a kill or two in your lane, even into a matchup like Camille, you can definitely run them over. And of course, you always have that benefit of being a champion people don't verse in top lane very often. But yeah, if you pick him in a situation where you have 1 or 2 broken ultis, the champion value goes up a lot. Even an ulti that's not game-breaking level like Malphite, even just having Varus ulti or something like that makes your champion's power go up. But because he's only situationally broken, and the best ultis for him, people don't really blind pick. Even now, Sylas jungle is so popular, they're not going to blind a Moo, stuff like that. I'd say he's very, really OP. This might even be one of these champions where I think he's better in ranks like gold, ranks like silver, stuff like that, compared to high elo, because people aren't going to think about the Sylas interaction as much in Champ Select. Moving on to Lulu, and Lulu as a top laner, I'll be putting her into A tier due to just how broken the laning phase is. She's so oppressive to play against in lane, really good blind pick, but the problem with her, the best way to compare would be to a champion like Teemo, where it's more about making the enemy top laner miserable and want to quit the game, and make them behind and make them useless, as opposed to you being strong and carrying fights or anything like that. You don't really scale super well individually in terms of side laning or individual team fighting impact, but you make your teammates strong, of course. So the difference between her and Teemo is you're still an enchanter at the end of the day. So if you have a teammate playing well on a Kindred jungle, or even a Xin Zhao, or even just a regular AD carry, you can make them strong. You still have your ulti, still have your W. So it's more about making the enemy top laner useless, and then buffing up your teammates is kind of the formula for this champion. But the weaknesses of her, you will make some team comps hideous. Just because you pick Lulu is not going to stop your jungler picking Karthus and just ruining your day, something like that. So keep them in mind as well. The team comp will be a little bit uglier. You're not that strong in side lane, and if you don't gain a lead in lane, you definitely should be, but if you don't gain a lead in lane, versus champs that can side lane, like a Jax, like a Yorick, you're going to be stuck under tower useless the whole time. So keep that in mind. You must perform well in lane on this champion, so I'd only recommend it to players that feel very confident in their laning ability. Next up, we have Kayn, and this is definitely a champion a lot of you have been asking me about in the comment section, so finally you don't have to wait anymore. We're going to be ranking him straight into the trash tier. So the first champion going in there, and I'm sorry for the Kayn enjoyers out there, but this is just not a good top laner. He doesn't really win any matchups, he doesn't scale well. If you don't get a lead, you're pretty much one of the worst champions in the game, and there are just so many matchups that are very difficult. Now, keep in mind, I will say I'm biased against Kayn. I've had my day ruined by Kayn jungles for probably the past 10 years or so. I have nightmares about how useless they are, but Kayn top is very similar as well. Sure, if you get into a good proxy position, and you proxy attack mid, proxy attack jungle, and you snowball, it can work. I'm not saying it's unplayable, but it's a champ that has to get fed to survive, and it loses to pretty much every top laner in the game, so I'm a pretty big hater of it. I don't really recommend them, unless you're already a Kayn addict. Next up, we have Rengar, and no hesitation at all, straight into S tier. One of the more powerful off-meta champs in the game, but I will warn you, he's probably the hardest top lane champion in the entire game. To put into perspective why I think that, I've probably versed 40 or 50 Rengar tops throughout the year, maybe 30 or 40, and there's probably only been about 3 of them that made me feel, okay, this champion's actually good, this champion's broken, and when I check their account, it's always between 5,000 and 12,000 games, and I'm not exaggerating. I'll check the past seasons, and it'll be season 3, 2,000, season 4, 1,000, so on and so forth. They are Rengar players for life, so you definitely need to be a long-term Rengar player if you want to make it work. I'll never recommend somebody to pick up Rengar. If someone asks me, oh, this champ looks cool, should I play him? I'll say no, because I don't want you to spend 5 years of your life jumping from bushes. There's probably champions that can get the job done without as much of a time commitment. But if you're a Rengar player, if you love playing him already, definitely you have a good future, if you commit to him for the long run, because this champion is just so powerful. Now, as you can tell by the build here, it's very much the roaming playstyle. Tiamat, Swifty Boots, Rev Hydra Rush, one-shot wave, look for play. Now, if your opponent is trying to challenge you, if they don't know what Rengar does, and they try to play the game, they're not sitting under their tower like a good boy, sure, you can farm him. He's really oppressive to play against. Not a lot of champions can beat him in lane. It's more about neutralizing him on champs like Poppy and stuff like that. Or other tanks like Cassante, just trying to go even, but because you can just roam with Tiamat and roaming with ulti, attack jungle, attack mid, very impactful that way. Very hard for players to play against, especially if they've invested very often, so huge benefit there. I'll say the weakness of this champion, pretty useless from behind. If you get behind versus champs, I'm telling this from my perspective, if you get behind versus champs like Jax, you are going to get farmed, and versus like Fiora, you're going to get run over if you do get behind, so he does struggle a lot there, and I'd say the biggest downside by far is just how hard it is to play it. You're going to have to commit a lot of time to him. Next up, we have Heimerdinger, who's going to find himself in A tier. But if you are a Heimerdinger player watching, he's going straight to trash tier. Please never play this champion again, because he's just way too unfun to play against. But if you're the Heimer player, definitely good, because not a lot of champions can really do anything about it. I like to call Heimerdinger the ultimate neutralizer, because he can neutralize pretty much any enemy top laner in the game. A common question I get asked in the TLA coaching program is, how do I beat Heimer? I'm a Darius player, I'm an Olaf player, I'm a Jax player, how do I beat this champion? And I almost want to say, you don't, just sit under your tower and build your arm, give a bit of farm, and hope you get some ganks. The best answer to Heimer is tanks like Sion, tanks like Ornn, building your arm. I like this section, I'm talking about Heimerdinger's placement, and I'm trying to teach you all how to beat him, but I'll just say this champion is so annoying to play against, that's probably why. But if you are going to play him, the downside you're going to have to watch out for is you will ruin a lot of team comps, you could imagine, if you don't have a tank jungler. So if you play with even like a Lee Sin or a Graves or something, Syndra, you don't really have any frontline, the team comps do get a bit ugly. And if you verse an outrange comp, it can be hard. Heimerdinger does really good when champs come to you. If you are playing up against champs that are longer range than you, like a Jinx Lulu or like a Syndra mid, champs like that, it can be quite tricky. So I do think he's really broken as an overall blind and counter pick in lane, but there will be some comps where the champion is useless. That's why he's not an S tier pick, but definitely an underrated one. Unless you're a Heimerdinger player watching, he's terrible and you should never play him again. Moving on to Xin Zhao, who's definitely one of the more cheesy off-meta champs we're going to be talking about, and he's going to find himself in B tier. This is definitely a champion where you must snowball. You must get ahead early, and don't get me wrong, he's very strong. You can do that, but he's just so easily gankable. He dies to pretty much every gank with no real 1v2 threat. So I'm not a big fan of a champ that must snowball, must play aggressive, and will just die to any gank. It makes it very, very difficult to snowball consistently. He's definitely a champion with high highs and very low lows, because from behind, your champion is pretty useless. He does have a little bit of build flexibility, as you can see. There's a bruiser build and a lethality build into champs like Gangplank or like Vladimir, we just want to one-shot them. That can work as well. But definitely if you're playing this champion, you're all in on the early game, you're trying to get ahead, and if you don't, you are going to have a pretty sad time. Next up, we have Swain, who's another B tier off-meta champion. And this is actually one of these off-meta champs that you don't need to be a main for. He's definitely a champ you can have in your pool. I'd say you should be a range top player if you play him. You know, you should mainly play champs like Jace and Nair and stuff like that if you want to play Swain. It's going to be weird for a Garen player to whip out the Swain out of nowhere. But a good thing about him in a range top pool is he's really good into dive. He's one of the best anti-dive champs in the game. But if you play champs like Jace, as we know, dive is really sad for you. So having a champ that's good into comps where other range top laners don't typically like, you know, like Aurora or like a Jace, it can be a little bit annoying into heavy dive beefcakes. Swain does amazing. It is quite cool for that type of pull, so I like him for that reason, but the opposite's true as well. Into outrange, it can be very, very difficult, and he's really easily gankable. Pre-6, you're going to die when you get looked at by any jungler if you're trying to push, so they can be tricky, so that's something to keep in mind as well. There are also some tricky matchups like Aurelia that may give you some trouble. Next up, we have Tahm Kench, and I'm going to be putting him into C tier. Not quite into trash, because he is a pretty solid blind pick. The problem with him is you don't really have a consistent way to get ahead, and if you're not ahead, you're completely useless. The main way this champion gets fed, I promise you, is your opponent gets bored, trades with you, and you spit them under tower. If your opponent just plays smart, plays for farm, dodges your licks, you're not really going to get a lead on this champion, and he's quite easily gankable as well if there's any ECC as well. So this champion useless from behind, pretty decent from ahead to be honest, but not as much as other champs, and it's really hard for you to gain leads consistently unless your opponent is kind of over-forcing and disrespecting you. So mainly just this brick ball of stats, more of a neutralizer, not really a champion that's consistent for climbing and winning games on. Next up, we have Sejuani, and this champion is going to find herself in C tier. She was higher earlier on in the year, probably around A tier, because she's very jungle meta reliant. She's really good when the jungle meta champs like Xin Zhao or Viego. There are a lot of Pantheons earlier on, but now all these geeks in the jungle are playing champs like Kiana, champs like Zed. Not really great pairings with Sejuani, even though they're melees. You don't really want to be playing with assassins. Now, a massive benefit of the champion, you have so much kill threat in lane. You take Ignite with TP, and you have so much solo kill threat, not a lot of players know your damage, so you can catch a lot of people off guard in that aspect. Now, the downsides, there are some hard matchups, like Olaf, like Darius can be quite tricky. A lot of them you can still cheese with Ignite, but it will be tough. And this champion also, you are very team reliant. You are pretty much a full tank champ that desperately needs a melee jungler, maybe a melee mid on your team. They're not going to pick around you, so you do have to keep that in mind. So not a very consistent champ to play, but if you already have a tank pool, if you're already a Scion Ornn kind of guy, you can spice up Sejuani as a situational pick. She doesn't really have a really high skill ceiling either. Now, there are some other builds here, there's just the standard one. Some Sejuanis like to go Leandries into full tank with Despair, stuff like that, so you can give yourself a bit more damage that way as well. Next up, we have Akali, and in my opinion, this champion is one of the best counter pick off meta champs to have in your pool. So if you see champs like Jax, champs like Camille, and you pick her as a counter, really brutal, really painful for them to play. Camille, Jax, Olaf, pretty much my favorite champions, all get ran over by her, so I am a little bit scarred in that aspect. But I'm still going to be fair, and I'm going to be putting her into B tier, because she does have some tough matchups. Some matchups like Renekton, these big beefy bruises that will give her a lot of trouble, champs of Lockdown, or even just any tank can do well into her. You can go Leandries into them and be fine with Conqueror, but still that's not really what Akali wants to do. She wants to snowball, so not really ideal either way. But I'd say as a counter pick, definitely S tier or A tier depending on the situation, as long as you have great Akali mastery. Now the downside is you kind of want to be solo AP on Akali, so if you have Akali and a bunch of magic damage elsewhere, your Kai'Sa doesn't get the memo and builds half AP anyway, and your mid lane is a full AP champ like Azir, you know, you are going to do a lot less damage if they stack him up. That can be a bit annoying, but if you snowball on this champion, you can make it work consistently, so it doesn't really matter that much. And in side lane, if you're ahead, you can one-shot most tops anyway, but if you're behind and you're just getting shoved in wave after wave by like a Renekton or even like a Nasus or something. If you're behind, you will have a pretty sad time. But that's most champions. If you're behind in top lane, it's a sad life. So definitely I wouldn't steer away from her just because of that. But you do have to be really good at it to make it work. She's not a counter pick that you can just play unless you have really high mastery. Moving on to Vayne, who I'm going to be putting in the lower end of B tier. She's pretty close to C tier, even though she's strong in lane and does scale well. She is a champion that struggles from behind against a lot of top lane champions. You're pretty easily gankable as well, so you have to execute extremely well to make her work. And just that overall lack of wave clear and not taking TP, it's so volatile, there's so much variance there, it can be quite hard to do well consistently on this champion. Not really a consistent pick, and there will be some drafts that you ruin as well. You're playing an 80 carry top, so if your team didn't get the memo and you're playing Vayne with a Z jungle, you can imagine that's pretty hideous. And not just your team as well, there are a lot of enemy team comps that make your champ not that useful. Of course, if you verse like a bruiser, beefcake top jungle support, you're going to be useful, but you're not going to get that every game. So I'd just say because there are some games where she's really good, but quite a few games where she's not that useful of a pick or really struggles to function, I'm going to put her pretty low in B tier, especially with the sense that no wave clear, no TP. That's just kind of recipe for one mistake or two mistakes and your game is over. Next up, we have Ivern, and Ivern I'm going to be putting on the lower end of C tier, just because he doesn't really have the same level of lane domination that other enchanters like Lulu has, or the amount of wave clear and utility like a champion like Zilean. Don't get me wrong, Ivern has his own utility, but it can't really be matched by Zilean's just one-shot the wave and boost around at 1000 movement speed playstyle, where Ivern in side lane is pretty weak. He's pretty easily gankable in lane, but if you verse someone that doesn't really know how to play against it, they're trying to scrap Daisy and getting their head kicked in, especially Malignant's Daisy, you can imagine you can definitely make him work, but he's another one of these champs where you do need your jungler to play well and be a champion like Vi or champion like Xin Zhao, someone that can stand in front of you and make use of your shields, so that is that kind of worry that you'll ruin the team comp as well. So I'd say in terms of other enchanted tops, the rest of them are probably going to be better, the rest of them on this list. But if you love Ivern for some reason, if you like the kind of micro of controlling Daisy at the same time, it's definitely doable. But the main thing you can just look at to sort of realize he's not a good top laner, you have to build stuff like Moonstone and Redemption. That's kind of a good sign you're probably playing him in the wrong role. Moving on to Azir, who I'm going to be putting into C tier. He's actually one of the best answers in the game into other ranged top laners, or fake range like Rumble and champs like Gangplank. He does amazing into them, and he's relatively hard to gank for a ranged top if you have good vision and soldier placement, stuff like that. So there's something to keep in mind as well, and you scale very well. So I actually like this champion. The reason why he's so low is he's pretty hard to play him, and this champ really needs frontline. He needs frontline in the game and engage, and your jungler's not going to care that you're hovering Azir. He's going to play Kiana, he's going to play Kayn, but again, if you pick him in the right spot, if you have that frontline, let's just give an easy example like a Skarner or a Zac, or maybe a champ like Xin Zhao or something, champion can function really well, especially if you're in a good matchup. But that's a lot of conditions. You need a good matchup, and you need your jungler to scale well. And again, this champion, if you're not in a good matchup, if you're blind picking, you can imagine champs like Aurelia, even like Camille can be quite tricky. And just any bruiser, if you get behind, it's going to be brutal. And yes, you are not that easily gankable, but if you do get caught off guard, if you do die to a gank, you are going to suffer a lot. So definitely, there are just too many conditions that make this champion good. But if those conditions are met, he's definitely A or S tier. And just one note as well, he's probably the best counter pick in the entire game into Gangplank. So if you're a Gangplank hater, there's probably going to be a good answer. So definitely that's something to, add to your pool if you already used to play mid or play Azir and you hate Gangplank. But again, it's such a high skill ceiling champ, I wouldn't really add him to your pool just for that. It's just something to keep in mind. Great into Rumble, great into Gangplank, these sort of annoying half-range champions. He is a nice champ to slot in if you do already have past experience with him. And even though we've already done our 20 champions, it wouldn't be a Coach Chippys tier list video without doing Shyvana. And you guys know how much I like this champion, so we're going to be putting her straight into the trash tier. Please stay away from her at all costs. This champion does nothing, loses lane, doesn't scale that well, doesn't do anything in fights or side lane. Stay away from her at all costs. Alright team, so as you can see here, I've reorganized the tier list. I've also added another row, because it felt so weird having a lot of champions in B where I wanted to move some down, but they weren't quite as bad as the champions below them, so I added an extra row here to make it a lot easier to visualize here. I also reorganized most of them from left to right, with the exception of S and A tier, because to be honest, the champs in S tier, both pretty equal, the champions in A tier all relatively similar power overall, so that's why only the champions below them, the left to right matters. So you can kind of see the champions are moved down from B to C. They're just too situationally good. Sylas with an Alistair ulti, of course. Azir into like a Rumble or a GP. Swain into a melee dive comp. Very situational, and those situations are pretty rare, I would say. So that's why they're in C tier. the champs in D tier. I just don't think they have consistent value, even if picked in the perfect situations. I wouldn't really put them again above most champions above them. So that's for that. The champions in trash tier, I really recommend not picking them unless you're already a main of them and you just love it so much. That's fine. And B tier, you can see some of them are situationally better than others. Of course, it's not equal every game, but Akali, I would just say, has more situations where she's good. She's more consistent value. Same with champs like Anivia and Zac, where champs like Xin Zhao and Varus are a lot more snowballing reliant, but because you can snowball relatively often, that's why they're not any lower than B tier. So, as usual, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. Hope you appreciated this type of video. Normally, we keep it strict on the meta, but I know you guys like to play a bit of weird champs every now and again, so if there's any I missed that you'd love to see me cover in the next one, maybe I'll make one every season, let me know in the comments.